Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Akir and today we're going to talk about objects in Java. Now this subject may be a little bit confusing, especially for people who are just beginning learning object-oriented language of some kind, and it may be a little bit confusing to grasp this topic. So therefore, I'm trying to make this topic a little bit easier, and hopefully that by the end of this video you will have a better understanding of what objects are and how to use them. And what I would recommend for you to do is also at the end of the video try it yourself and try to come up with your own objects, and practice would make you be successful, and no doubt, at this. So let's begin. First of all, what is an object in Java? An object is anything that you can take from the real world and translate it to code. But you can just choose anything you'd like. For example, I can choose a car, and everything that I choose, I need to divide into two segments. The first segment, it's the attribute of that object that I choose to represent, and the other segment is the action of that object. So, also known as instances, okay, and methods, which are the actions. So, for example, if I chose a car object, so every car should have the following attributes, okay, like brand name, size, maybe color, maybe weight. Okay, that's enough for attributes, I think. And actions. It could go, it could stop, it could turn right, turn left. So basically you could do that with anything. You could choose, I don't know, let's think about bicycle. If you want to represent a bicycle object, so what are the attributes of a bicycle? It could have a color, could have weight, a number of gears, and then for the actions, for the methods, also known as methods, could be change a gear, maybe change a gear, go and stop, and go right, go left. You get the point. I misspelled the bicycle, I think, so sorry about that. Okay, so let's try another example, and let's try it with a person. Now try to think, try maybe to pause the video and think about attributes and actions of a person, okay? Okay, so what I can think of that I want to apply here is every person has a name, age, weight, height. What else? Could be an inner quality, like for example, his mood, the person's mood, okay? And actions: walk, dance, run, and sit. Okay, so you get the point. You take an object that you want to represent, you divide it into two categories: the attributes and the actions, also known as instances and methods. Okay, and let's see it in code, how we do that. So let's open up Eclipse here, and if you have another compiler, another IDE, it's completely fine. It doesn't matter what you choose. What I recommend is also to be always organized. So in here I'm going to create a new package under the source, under the object library. I'll call it objects2. But this is me. You can choose whatever you want. And then in it, create a class. Let's say we want to create an object which is a book, okay? We want to create a book object, so we create a class named book. And I'll close the other classes that we have here and save them, not to be distracted. Okay. So what every book should have. What qualities a book should have. Let's see how much time. Okay. Okay, so let's say it has a name. So basically a name of the book. It has, and it's okay that it's currently not giving me an error. I'm going to fix it. I'm just going to translate it into code. So gradually I'm going to make it work. Name, and let's say number of pages. Maybe let's say also author. Okay, I want to know who wrote the book. Okay, so we have this information. Now, as a convention and something that we should use is whenever we create those instance variables, we are going to make them private. So, private, and add private to any attribute. So private and private. And the reason we are doing that, I should explain it more soon, but one reason that we are doing it, we want to protect our variables from an outside change, okay? And we will go back to that soon. Now we should include the type of the variable. So this variable, the name should be a string and should have a semicolon at the end. And number of pages should be an integer because it's a whole number. Number of pages could be 402, 23, and so on. Author, that should be a string too because this is a name of a person. Okay, and now the second thing that I should create is for every instance variables that we see here, I'm going to create both get and set method. And the reason for me to do that is to be able to access those variables from an outside class. Okay. Now it's getting a little bit confusing. The reason it is private is we want to protect our variables from being accessed or being modified sorry, by an outside class. But what we are going to do now is going to be a kind of a loophole to access those variables and be able to modify them anyway. But when we modify them, we are going to modify them per object. It depends on what object we are intending them modifying to. Okay. So what we do now is to create a get and set methods for every instance variables. In Eclipse you have this shortcut. You go to source and generate getters and setters, select all, and okay. Now you see that it does it automatically for you. For every instance variables you have a get method and a set method. Get name, set name. Get number of pages and set number of pages. Get author and set author. And the idea is that you will be able to change those instance variables from outside the class, and you will be able to read them as well. You'll be able to communicate with them from outside of the class. Because you can't communicate with them by just calling them by their names, by their variable name, because those variable names are private. But you can do the same functionality, use the same functionality by using those methods instead. So if for example you want to change a book's name, you can use the set name method. If you want to get a book's name, you can use the get name method. Okay, so that's the second thing we did. We have another thing to do, which is a constructor, or maybe a few constructors, but we will go back to that and see that later on. Okay, now what I'm going to do is to create another class, which in that class we should test our, what we wrote basically. So I just called the test, but it could be anything. I pointed out that it should have a public static void main method to test and to run basically everything that we wrote. The main method is basically like a control panel. It what happens when the program runs. When a program runs, the first thing that it tries to look at, goes to look at, is the main method. So from that, we could call out everything that we have written so far in other classes and test them out. Okay. Now what I want to test is the creation of an object. So let's do that. So this is the syntax for creating an object. We say that we want to create an object from the book class that we just wrote here. It should be called book A and will be equal to new book and empty parentheses. This has also a meaning, which I will get back to soon. Let's create another object the same way. Now, what just happened here is that we created two objects of the book class. So basically what happened, we went to the book class and basically we copied everything that we see here and put it inside each object that we created. So upon creating an object, everything got copied and put in that object. So in here we created book A, everything got copied from the book class and been put in book A. And then everything got copied from the book class again and put inside the object book B. So if you imagine, those objects are really like boxes or containers if you want. Okay, they contain everything that is in the class that they were made from. So basically you could open this box, and when you open the box you see all that. So if you open the box called book A that you created, you see all of that. And if you can open the box book B, you see again all of that. But it's important to understand that every object got its own copy of what's written in the class that it was made from. So if you change the name, for example, of book A, if you access what's in book A and change the name, for example, the name of book B is staying the same. It doesn't change. And why? Because they have different memory allocations. They got their own individual copy. Every book is basically stored in a different location in memory. So in here we did that syntax and we did the new, and that word new tells us that I want some memory allocation to store something of a book item named book A. This is our reference. Basically it goes to the memory and tries to look for an available space. So let's say that location that is given to book A is at location 2000. Let's say the location for book B is 4000. So this is done by the new. It's allocated a new address in memory, and we refer to that address by calling book A and book B. So if you imagine like a big drawer that you open and you have files in that drawer, and you select the location of the file and you want to put something in the drawer, you just find an empty space and put it in there, and then you get a reference. Okay, you put it in place 2000 or 4000. Or like when you go into a party or a convention and you put in your coat and they give you a number, and then when you come back to collect your coat, you give that number and to them, and they give you that code. That's exactly the same thing. That's referencing an object for that I use, but you use it by what you assigned as the name of it. Okay, and this thing is also very important. This thing is calling a constructor. Constructor, if you imagine, you could just imagine it as people who builders, actually constructor people, You could use the first constructor person, or you could use the second constructor person to help you build your object. But in here we don't have constructors yet, so it uses the default constructor to create that object. Okay, so now we said it's like a container. It's like, an object is like a container, contained everything that is in that class that it was created from. Okay, so let's try to change things in it. Right a few minutes ago, we wanted to change the name of book A. So let's try to do that. So book A. Now we are accessing it in memory. We'll say, okay, book A, we want to go to this part of it, to the name, and basically essentially change it. So how do we do that? Let's try something which is not going to work, but let's try it to learn from the mistake anyway. So I'm calling it a name and said, since the name is a string, I could say, I don't know, The Hobbit, to try to change the name, but it doesn't allow me. Why? Let's see. Because it's not visible. The name attribute is not visible. What am I trying to call by doing this? I'm going to inside book A. I open it with this dot. This is very important. If it's like a box or like a container, the dot is a very important thing. It means open the box and get to that part that I tell you. Get to the name part of it. The name part of it is basically this one. Is this variable. But I can't access it because it's private. If it was public, now everything's fine. Now I can access it and change the name to The Hobbit, and it should work. But as a convention, I'm not allowed to do that, so it should stay private. And if I want to change it anyway, I'll use the method which is setting the name to something else, which is called setName. So I'll use this method, and this method, as you saw here, it accepts string, the strings that you want to change the name to. So let's do it by using the set method. So let's say book A. Now get me something from inside. What do I want to get? I want to get a method this time called setName. And I don't think I see it here, but okay, I see it here. setName, and it takes a string. So let's now call it, give it a string. This is just a string I'm giving it. This is what it asks for. The Hobbit. And now it is all set. Now I want to see if it's been applied, those changes been applied. So basically after I did that, what happened is it took my the Hobbit that I gave it, put it as the name here. It's a string, but this is a name inside the method only. So when I give it to the method, how it should be called in the method, what I give to the method should be called. In here inside the method it would be called name. So the Hobbit is basically name. This is the name in here, we take it from here. So this is the Hobbit, and I put the Hobbit inside the name of this. And who is this? This is the object that the method is running on. Okay, as that the method has been called on. So the method has been called on book A. So book A is this. It doesn't know from advance, so that's why it says whatever the object that it's been called by the method is going to be called this. For so I pass it on. So I'm taking book A. I'm activating the method setName on book A. So book A is this. So this dot name. So basically this variable of book A is going to be set now as the name that I've given it, the Hobbit. So it takes book A, and set its name to name variable to the Hobbit. And now we'll try to print it out to the screen. And in order to do that, we'll use the get method, get name, and see if we got it printed out to the screen. Of course we don't, because we need to put it inside a system out print line. Sorry about that. But this is actually an important point, and I will explain why I didn't do anything just before. Now we see the Hobbit. Why didn't do anything just before? Let's look at the getName method. So book A, we opened that and used the getName method format. So we go to book A, we see that. After we set the Hobbit to be the name, this is now the name and the Hobbit. And getName is basically retrieving that name, the Hobbit name. But it's allowed to do that because it's public, so we can call it from outside. So it returns basically just the name. Returns, and that returned is returned as a string. And name is a string, so it's returning to the one who's calling it. So it's returning the Hobbit to the one who's been calling it. So we call that from here, book A.getName. This is how we call the method. When method finished, it returned a string. So that string came back to here. So that all things that I marked here is basically a string. And if it's just there by itself without doing anything, written by itself like we saw before, without the system out print line, it's just an empty string just showing on the screen. But we can choose what to do with it. This is a string when it ceases to operate, when this method is basically done. And we can choose, after it's done, we can print it out. So the first thing it would do is to go to the method, run it, and it returns the Hobbit, and then it prints it out. Alternatively, we can also store it inside a variable. We could say string, I don't know, temp equals that, and that is completely okay to do because this is a string and we set it inside a string variable called temp. Okay. Okay, so this is the end of part A. On the next lesson, we are going to talk about constructors and see how to work with them. In the meantime, I suggest you practice what you've learned here and try to put it in your own class. Think about an object from real life and create, first of all, think about the instances and the action it has, and then apply it to your program, just as so. Then later on create a get and set method for every instance, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you very much for watching.